It is the very best day to just show up. Hi, everyone. Yvonne Heath here, nurse turned author, speaker, and changemaker, and your host. Welcome to Navigating Grief with Heart and Humor, where we talk about, plan, and prepare for grief, transitions, and end of life, and all the messiness in between, long before it arrives, and diffuse the fear so we can live fully now. Or most of the time, we have been through a trauma, a crisis, the death of a loved one, something that we found very challenging, and we realized how ill prepared we were. We did not have coping skills, strategies. We did not create a soft landing for ourselves. And we have chosen to do it differently next time. By being proactive, by having conversations, by learning along the way, that is exactly what we can do. So as we spend this time together here, I invite you to just take a couple of deep breaths to land here, to forget about everything else going on in your life, set an intention. What is it that your heart needs to hear today? What brought us together? And I will do the same so that I can share what I need to share, what you need to hear, and we can continue to learn from one another, because that is what it's all about. So I'm going to take 2 deep breaths and just presence myself so I can just show up for you. When I do that, I set my intention to be fully present, to listen to my own intuition, my own wisdom, which is gathered from my own life experience, the good, the not so good, the challenging. There's always opportunities in learning, and no matter what we have gone through, we can do it differently next time, and we can learn from this and learn from those around us. And that is exactly what I am doing for the second act of my life, because I had 27 years of nursing, of suffering excessively, of being in the deep trenches of grief personally, and truly not having the coping skills, the strategies. I was not proactive. I pretended I was fine when I wasn't. Can anyone relate to that? By trying to be a strong, independent woman. And I've thrown that all out the window. What I know now is a strong human being, is someone who is willing to be vulnerable, who is willing to lean on others, to ask for what they need, to just show up for others, even when it is uncomfortable. Of course, it will be uncomfortable at times. And the more we have these conversations, the more we can be okay with that discomfort. Don't wait for it to be comfortable to check in on your neighbor whose child was just arrested, whose spouse just died, who just got divorced, and they are absolutely devastated. We can learn to do this differently. And one of the areas for sure that we are very uncomfortable is when children are grieving, or when we are grieving a child who has died, or a relationship torn apart. And so as I continue, I've been sharing wisdom gleaned from years and years of, again, my experience and speaking to so many beautiful people. I shared many of these stories in my book, Love Your Life to Death. And we have been going through chapter by chapter. I always share with people that this book it's all weathered and worn, because I read it every year and the stories land differently. And in the last episode, we started talking, going through chapter 8, which is having the talk with children and teens about grief, death, and dying. And it is certainly one of the more challenging aspects of, we are already death phobic and grief phobic, let alone having these conversations with children. And the truth is that is not something we can avoid. And we started talking about that in the last episode, saying we cannot shield children from grief because grief is a part of this journey. We do not only grieve the death of loved ones, we grieve things, we grieve people, losses of life and losses of things in life, such as friends who move away, classes that we fail, parents who divorce, being bullied. There are so many things we grieve, and yet we don't normalize conversations about grief. We normalize conversations now about mental health, thank goodness. We fail to see the correlation between being ill prepared for grief being unsupported or ignored. Children can often be the forgotten grievers, especially if we are also grieving. So we can forgive our past and what we didn't do, and we can do it differently next time. Because the greatest thing that we can do for our children is be the best example and develop our own coping skills and strategies and look and say, wow, yes, I did this and it worked well. And I wish I had done this differently, and have those open, honest conversations. We don't have to be strong for them. We can grieve with them. We don't have to teach them everything. We can learn together. And so that is what these conversations are about. And I will tell you, they are challenging, right? In the last episode, again, I shared when our pet, Frankie, the pug, died, and everything that we learned together as a family, how we grieve so differently, how truly painful it was to say goodbye to our little pug. And it's like, wow, my heart feels so broken, so broken. And I teach my children that I have rituals and we have conversation, and I have a belief about life and death, that we stay spiritually connected and that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So that energy of our loved one, of our pet is everywhere, that we love them, that we spent time with them, and that on our heart that felt so broken, there's a little scar. So our pug was Frankie. So there's a little Frankie scar. And our heart heals. Battered and scarred, never the same, but it will heal if we learn to take better care of ourselves and each other and become proactive and have these conversations throughout life. So let's continue with chapter 8. There was just so much to talk about in this chapter. So I invite you to, again, watch the last episode, and then we're going to continue on here with other stories. And I love reading this. It's insightful, Tanner. So living in the country, we spent a lot of time driving. So many of our teachable moments occurred on the road. When you have your kids in the car, maybe tell them, maybe put down your phone, put down, we can listen to music and also have some conversations. It's the most wonderful time. On one night when we were driving to Cub Scouts, Tanner's deepest thoughts came to surface, and we had the most profound conversation. I felt as though I was speaking to a spiritual leader and not a 9-year-old boy. A 9-year-old boy, let me repeat that, right? We used to, thank goodness we're moving away from these gender stereotypes where girls, it's okay for them to show emotion. Boys, it's not okay for them to show emotion. That just needs to go right out the window. And the more we have and normalize these conversations, the more open our children will be. And again, it may be uncomfortable for you. Have the conversations anyway. So I shared with Tanner, or I shared in the book, I often said I choose to believe our bodies are temporary, and that when we no longer need them, our spirits leave and are free to be in the sky, in nature, everywhere, and we remain in the hearts of our loved ones forever. In fact, On an earlier occasion, I found out I might have said it once too many times as Tanner interrupted with yeah, yeah. When you die, your spirit will live in our hearts forever, and we can always talk to you. We know, we know. Well, I'm glad they know. So on this ride to town, Tanner pensively spoke of what it might be like when you die and your spirit is free. He said, maybe we come back again into another body. Surprised by his astute wondering, I smiled and said, yes, maybe we do. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You would never have to be afraid because you just keep coming back. Bye for now. See you in the next life. That's great to believe, he agreed. Then he pondered for a moment and then announced, well, I'm not afraid of death. It's just a natural part of life, and people are going to have to accept that. Incredible insight. We'll just have to soften the delivery. So imagine that this 9-year-old boy, because we normalized conversations about grief, dying, death, because when there was an animal that died, a pet, or on the road, we took that time to have a conversation. We always said, we're here as long as we're here. Well, Mom, how long are you going to live? I said, I have no idea. I plan on being here for a very, very long time, but you never know. Sometimes people die suddenly and we didn't think that they were going to, because sometimes people are sick and we know that they're not going to get better and they die. And sometimes it just surprises us. We just normalize these conversations, and thank goodness. That does not mean our children don't grieve. They grieve wholeheartedly. And I also share with them how the way to heal that heart and create those scars is to just talk about how you feel, express how you feel. And sometimes you don't even know. And sometimes grief is very confusing. Sometimes you feel okay, other times you don't. And you just sometimes you don't even know how you're going to react. Wouldn't it be wonderful for us to learn that first as adults and then to teach our children? We are so wonderful in wanting to make it okay and better for everyone else. And the best place to start is with ourselves. And again, the good news is the greatest thing that we can do is teach by example, by acknowledging and allowing our grief, by saying, I don't have all the answers. Of course, we don't have all the answers. Why would we? But we can normalize conversations. We can learn. I am committed to ongoing learning. I have written a book and I have read more books and attend more webinars and just continuously connect with people that I can learn from. And that's how we can do it differently. I love that one person. This was one of the first people that I reached out to, or that reached out to me when I said I was going to write a book. And her name is Karen. And we talk about a child's unresolved grief never goes away. And Karen's story is that her mother died in 1967 when she was a little girl. And it was sudden. She was on her way to a conference. Her mom was on her way to a conference. She was killed in a car accident. When she died, her father had no idea how to handle it. He had no one to really guide him through it. And so pictures of their mom were just removed. They were never to speak of her again. The funeral director told the dad not to bring the children to the funeral. All that was left was sadness, devastation, and fear. Now, when I spoke to Karen, she was in her 50s and had carried this grief with her entire life. And it was painful to hear her story, and it was painful to hear how Her mother was never to be spoken about again. And this poor father and this poor community, they just didn't know how to do it differently. And her father, stuck in his grief, Karen wanted to have a conversation about her mom years and years later. And this is what she shared. Karen tried to talk to her dad about it years later, but his response was, I'm Humpty Dumpty, and when your mom died, I fell off my wall and I broke into a million pieces. Because I had kids, I had to put those pieces back together and get back up on that wall. Now you're trying to pull the bricks out of my wall. And if those bricks fall down, this time I won't be able to put the pieces back together. End of conversation. Lingering grief he never moved through. He just didn't know how. Oh, I want to pause there for a moment because I have heard many people saying something happened tragically in their childhood. The death of a loved one, the death of a sibling, the death of a dog that they didn't even really know what happened to their dog. And, the people around them now are uncomfortable when they bring up this stuff from the past. Why are you talking about this? It happened such a long time. Let it go. Let it go. And here's what we can do differently next time or now. If that has been your reaction to someone who wanted to talk about a loved one who died 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, it doesn't matter. Open your heart and say, I wish that I would have been able to hear you earlier before I thought that I was doing the best thing by telling you not to talk about it, right? We want people to get over it. We do not get over grief. What we can do is move through it. And if we are well supported, and that means those around us acknowledge and allow our grief, allow us to express our grief. If we bring it up again in 10 years, we have someone that can sit and hear us. If that's what we need, we can do this differently. And the greatest thing that we can do is just show up. Just show up for that person in however they need us to. And when we have children who are grieving and we are adults and we have no idea how to navigate it, that's okay. That's okay. Just show up. Just show up for this child. Acknowledge and allow their feelings. Allow them. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross used to have children draw what they were feeling. And through that art, she just learned so much. Children may not want to have a conversation. They don't have the words. They don't have the language, the life experience to maybe express how they're feeling. They can express it in different ways. Art, play, whatever it may be, but seek help. There's so many places where we can learn. You can go to virtualhospice.ca and learn. There's kidsgrief.ca. You can actually just put kidsgrief.ca. And there are people that can help you to navigate this. Don't do it alone. In the meantime, I promise you that you do not have to be strong for them. You can grieve with them. Let's just not allow them to be forgotten grievers. Right? There are forgotten grievers everywhere. Those who, you may have this little tight circle and someone died and children are grieving, and there could be all kinds of other people around and children grieving all around us. We don't need to judge it. We don't need to fix it. We can just show up and allow it. And, when we can grieve as community, when we can gather, I think it's just a beautiful thing. We can gather as families, in schools, at work, when someone is grieving. And again, if someone is grieving, the thing that none of us ever want to live through, a child dying. I shared earlier my experience with Tyler, who went down a very dangerous road of drugs and addiction. And thank goodness, Tyler is still living. He still has struggles, and he's very committed to living a good life and being a good human and doing good things and being a good dad. He has a little man, Ollie. He's had many, many, many friends die. And to witness the pain, the parents and the friends, and in my son, and all of these friends were in their 20s or younger. It is excruciating and unbearable for them. And if you want to be able to just show up and love and support them along the way, I invite you, I implore you to seek out resources, to develop coping skills and strategies, to have an acceptance that this is their journey. And, when we get mired in why did this have to happen? Why did this young person have to die? It's not fair. The question why can be so damaging, because there's never going to be an acceptable reason. What reason will we hear that we will be able to say, oh, okay, that's why? Our hearts, the grief is agonizing and feels unbearable. We need our community. We need one another more and more to create a soft landing in this excruciating time. And let's not forget the children, right? They may not express verbally. How they are feeling. They don't have the vocabulary, as I said. They may be acting out. They may be regressing. Little kids who were potty trained and suddenly they're no longer potty trained. They're acting out. They're defiant. They're breaking things. They don't know how to express this. And what if we are there to say, wow, you must be really angry. You're breaking this. Wow, and why don't we go over here? We need to support one another in all of this. So I'm going to share a little bit about my most challenging conversation. And it is about having the conversations with children who have been through tremendous grief and who have also known other children who died. Believe me, this was very challenging for me, especially at the time I was having these conversations, long before I developed coping skills and strategies and all of the things that I now have in my self-care tool bucket. So facing children's mortality, we all feel it, we all believe it. Children should not die, and we certainly do not want to outlive our own children. Just the thought of it brings excruciating pain to our hearts. I spent most of my nursing career carefully avoiding ever having to face the fact that children die sometimes. Everywhere I worked, it was adults only. And I'm just laughing when I supervised, and the emerge is like, well, I'll supervise unless a child comes in and there's a trauma or the child dies, then I'll resign and fall apart. That was my strategy. I helped out in the delivery room, and I said, yes, I will help out until there's a death or a stillbirth or something tragic, and then I'll fall apart and resign. Those were my biggest skills. So I avoided all of this. By some miracle, I avoided these tragedies, even when I assisted in the delivery room. My deacon avoid strategy was working. Phew! It wasn't until our older son, Tyler, became a teenager and lost his way. I had to face the painful truth in the most challenging time of my life. I could outlive my child. Thankfully, Tyler got the help he needed. It wasn't easy, but he pulled out of that nightmare and found his way. And he wrote a letter saying he was grateful to his parents for saving his life. Reading that he had been so close to death was painful. I knew then I had to find my way to greater acceptance of the things in life and death that I could not control. This was one of the most significant catalysts that led me to this new journey. Interviewing and spending time with wise people helped me reach the acceptance I longed for, I needed. So I met with 11-year-old Nathan. Nathan and I met at the library. I snuck in chips and Gatorade and said, hide them. I was trying to be funny because I was so uncomfortable. Oh my goodness. I quickly realized that Nathan had more insight into life and had witnessed more death than most adults. In 2010, at the age of 6, Nathan was diagnosed with leukemia. A 3.5-year battle against cancer followed. Oh, needless to say, it was devastating for him and for his family. And he persevered and got through it. Only 3 months later, they received more devastating news. The cancer was back. It would be a 6-year battle of chemo and bravery. Nathan has endured more than any child should ever have to. He has known 6 children who have died, some of whom he became close to as they fought their disease and spent months in the hospital together. But he is more than a survivor. He is a lover of life and of people, and a really special kid. So what Nathan shared with me is that he says, I share my point of view. It's important to figure out what scares you about death and to believe something that makes you feel better about it. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was just afraid of not seeing my family anymore. I choose to believe that we are all here for our purpose. Our bodies are temporary, and then our spirits. Oh, wait, this is me telling Nathan what I believe. I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. I shared with Nathan that I said, I choose to believe that we are all here for a purpose. Our bodies are temporary, and then our spirits leave our body, but stay everywhere in everyone we love. So we stay connected. And that makes me feel better. And Nathan piped in, well, I believe in reincarnation. I said, oh, that would be wonderful. And so Nathan shared with me that we have to, first of all, you've got to have an opinion of what you are going to think or what you think is going to happen when you die. Is that opinion a good thing or a bad thing? Then you just have to keep going. Live your life. Don't be worried about leaving your parents. You're not going to remember them anyway. You don't need to worry about death. You just need to live your life. Even if you do know that you're going to die in a couple of weeks, just have fun and do what you can before your time is up. And even if you don't know, do what you can. Have fun. Whew. And then I asked Nathan, so you think we should always tell the truth about dying? He replied, we always tell the truth, even if it's hard. You should get some input on it because you want to live your last life when you're on that table. You might say, I love you, Mom, or whatever you want. You want to cherish those moments with your family, not knowing that you're going to die and you just don't have any closure. I just always think about freedom, doing what you want. That's the best part. And I'll close with that. Our insightful Nathan, who says, let's always tell the truth and let's just support one another and let's not get mired in why. And let's just show up for children, acknowledge and allow whatever we may be going through. So thanks for joining me again for these challenging conversations. Find any information at Love Your Life to Death, and I will join you in the next episode. I know these conversations are challenging, but in the meantime, I invite you to plan your life, plan your death, and then just love your life to death. And always bring your own tambourine to the party. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. Feel free to reach out anytime.